We are doing a series of short episodes from our trip across Spain, particularly Andalusia, and other than being just gorgeous and fascinating in so many ways, it also affords us a unique opportunity. As we mentioned last time, the first ever travel episode we attempted was an 11-minute rundown of a trip to Seville, then Cordoba and Granada. Back when I actually thought it was a good idea to attempt segments to camera while on location. Yeah, quickly went off that. We also discovered what I think anyone attempting travel filming discovers: you need so much more footage than you realise. From that first trip, I came back with about 22 gig of videos for the 5 days. Now, nowadays, that's basically one museum visit if I have enough time to get round properly. This time, I took about 32 gig just from Seville, and that was just for the roughly 1 day we were there. But yeah, all of this how the sausage is made talk is fine if a little self-indulgent. This revisit to Seville was several things. It was a stopgap between a couple of locations we were heading, and a great chance to get all nostalgic. I mean, I can't deny it felt amazing to have the familiar feelings rushing back as we walked the streets. But it was also a chance to get more footage, and finally, it's a chance to reappraise the place. I mean, yeah, this is not to decide whether it's good or not. I mean, I don't need any convincing of that. But there's a tremendous amount of stuff you could say about Seville, and I am not going to say it all here. You know, one day in the future, we're going to have this huge series on the history of Al-Andalus, but for now, this is Seville in 24 hours, and we're going to edit accordingly. In fact, I checked the timestamp. We were actually there for more like 19 hours this time. I mean, if you add the 2 hours we spent when we transited back from Merida a couple of days later, that just about makes it up. Yeah, whatever. So, picking up from last time, we got the train out of Malaga. Credit where it's due, the trains are clean, pleasant, and not even that pricey. You know, Europeans might find this funny, but coming from the UK, you know, we see a train network that's clean, inexpensive, and fairly well run. It's like, what is this witchcraft?
When did you make a pact with the Dark Lord?
As we got further away from the highlands around Malaga, the landscape morphs and the mountains roll out into flatter plains. But yes, shortly after arriving in Seville, the atmosphere could not have been more different to Malaga. I mean, I've learned if you do anything less than gush praise for a location, then the comment section gets very grumpy and starts insulting my mum. But look, definitely enjoyed Malaga. I wouldn't characterise it as anything less than a great time. But man, only a short walk in Seville was enough to remind me just how unique this place is. I mean, Seville is a riot of colour, patterns and embellishment, not always of considerable antiquity, but the way the design ethos flows into every flourish on every corner of the city, yeah, it's quite something. A brief walk from Santa Justa, that's the main train station, past the fragments of the Roman aqueduct, which I glimpsed on the first trip, but we didn't have time to catch. I seem to recall we were power walking to a connection. And then, oh, looky here. Yeah, there's a real rush seeing the cathedral again. It really is unique in the world. I mean, while of course a cathedral becomes something of a unique thumbprint for any city, if I flash up, for example, Winchester, Exeter and Hereford cathedrals in quick succession, I mean, I wouldn't hold it against you if you couldn't pick them apart. Plus, I did throw in Tewkesbury Abbey there as a red herring, so what you gonna do? But Seville Cathedral is an absolute riot of different architectural ideas. More on that in a bit. So, quick bag drop on our Airbnb in this modern but still very beautiful courtyard apartment building. We hadn't realised we were actually staying in the host's flat with the host. That's not normally what we go for, but the host was lovely and very chill. So, back out, low angle flag shot. As you may have gathered, this time we were there in October rather than December from last time, but without much discernible difference in the temperature or vibe, still busy and buzzing, but without being overcrowded. It seems like the city remains vibrant all through the year. I mean, while Seville is an amazing place to go as a visitor, it's got more than enough going on with the locals to prevent it getting hollowed out by tourist accommodation. And possibly Seville's greatest asset, other than its architecture and design, is the river. We popped down just by the Torre del Oro, or Golden Tower. Last time made the baffling choice to get stills of the tower, but barely any video, so didn't make that mistake this time. Yeah, it's an interesting metaphor for the city. This might be a good place to insert a brief history. Working backwards, Seville became very prosperous from the proceeds that flooded in from the Spanish Empire. While not a coastal city, the Guadalquivir is more than wide and deep enough to allow shipping upriver to Seville. But while the city was able to beautify itself with this stream of wealth, Seville was already a large and prosperous city long before this. Without detailing the Roman or Visigothic city on this occasion, under the Islamic rule of Spain in Al-Andalus, which is also where we get its name through a series of linguistic corruptions, the Roman Hispalis becoming Ishbilia, becoming Sevilla, and finally Sevilla. Seville had grown to be a major urban centre, and as such, when Al-Andalus fractured from a unified caliphate into a mosaic of small city-states known as the Taifa states, Seville was one of the most powerful and significant. However, this political fracturing left Iberia vulnerable to continuous conflict, and Seville ended up paying tribute to the Christian state of Castile. It would later, along with much of southern Spain, be taken over first by the Almoravids and then the Almohads, and goodness knows that whole situation needs more unpacking than this short explainer. But the latter of these two, the Almohads, left perhaps the most distinctive architectural footprint in Seville. Little wonder, as for close to a century, Seville became the capital of the Almohad state. They built, amongst other things, the Torre del Oro, and both what is now the Cathedral of Seville and the Giralda, the minaret now bell tower. And you can see comparable Almohad minarets in Morocco like these in Marrakesh. The city fell to a Castilian siege in 1248, and oh boy, I'm trying not to get into areas that I simply don't have time to even begin to outline, such as the subject of convivencia. I mean, Seville did not turn out like Toledo or Palermo, where periods of mutual tolerance allowed a flowering of cross-cultural exchange and scholarship, of whom Western Europe was the main benefactor. After the siege of 1248, a large portion of the Islamic population was expelled from the city. And yeah, this leaves Seville somewhat split. Many of the Islamic treasures of the city survive, but they're sort of isolated standouts in a city that is now drastically different in character. And by the way, if you're not content with just one, something I completely missed the first time around the Torre del Oro, it has a sister tower just a few yards away. This is the Torre de la Plata, or Silver Tower. And it's funny how the Torre del Oro is busy getting all the attention at the waterfront, while this contemporary structure is tucked away almost out of sight, just 100 yards away, inauspiciously guarding a parking lot. So we were taking a lazy walk. There's this whole open area on the eastern bank with people running, cycling, or just taking in the space, and as ever, a seemingly endless supply of canoeists? Canoers? Canoes? I don't know what the collective noun for people in canoes is. On the previous visit, we'd got this incredible dusk at the river with vivid magenta skies, which was just such a special memory. Obviously, not quite as vivid on this occasion, but still nice to be back. So we sat down for a drink and a snack. Wait a minute, it's doing it again! Yeah, perhaps uncannily. I don't know, maybe extraordinarily vivid skies are more of a regular fixture in Spain? Maybe it's the autumn months, I don't know, but just look at that! I'd thought of the last trip's skies as a fluke, but here it was once again. Stunning colours along the banks of the Guadalquivir. So that was incredible. There's a slight gap in my footage here, which was us having dinner, and we did link back to the waterfront after dark. Okay, so early morning, got up before the sun had peeked over the roofs just yet, and was rewarded with an extremely vivid sunrise. As you'd know from our first episode, we were very taken with the Plaza de España. I mean, yeah, what an incredible spot. But considering its looks, it's pretty recent, built as part of an expo in 1928. It's somewhat Baroque, somewhat Mudejar. It's a lot of influences. An aside here, I generally don't get on too well with things like neo-Gothic. You know, I spend a lot of time in churches that are 800 plus years old. So when you have what are mostly Victorian or even 20th century attempts to look old, I don't know, it just leaves me a bit cold, like you're kind of being cheated. You know, I'm not saying it can't be done well or that it's not preferable to a homogeneous blob of concrete and chrome, but yeah, there's just nothing quite like walking into a place of genuine antiquity and knowing these stones have been atop each other for nearly 1,000 years or more. Now, regards to the Plaza de España, while you can't perfectly bottle the vibe of Seville, it's almost a brand unto itself, and it's perhaps best represented by its colour and its ceramics. And if I may gush a moment, I think the Plaza de España manages this vibe spectacularly. While from afar it's the spires and the colonnade that first catch the eye, when closer the ceramics and their colours are what make this truly special, more than any other Baroque European square. I mean, combined with the use of water and the scale of the place, it's an almost perfect encapsulation of the Sevillian vibe. And yeah, for that it is very special. Oh, and just something more fun and much more trivial. Something about the hot Spanish summers and, well, fairly hot autumns as well. I'm not sure which tree produces this leaf, but they're scattered around and with barely a drop of rain to soften them. Okay, just listen to this. Actually, that audio is not as impressive as when you're there. Just trust me, it sounds like the sound of an alligator eating tortilla chips. They are spectacularly satisfying to crunch. There was time for one more thing before we left. In fact, with the queues factored in, only one thing. I had weighed back and forth, giving the Alcazar a revisit, and I undoubtedly still will. But even half an hour before opening, the queue was already somewhere between 50 to 100 people deep. I did, however, make a point to queue to get back inside the cathedral. The outside already dazzles with incredible architectural details. This had formerly been a Grand Almohad project as the new mosque for the city. In fact, it was only completed 50 years before the fall of Seville to the 1248 siege. It was retrofitted into a cathedral, and unlike the Cordoba Mesquita, which, while a cathedral on paper, is a pretty faithful survival from Islamic Spain with just an additional chunk of Catholicism kind of stuck in the middle, Seville Cathedral is more convincingly a cathedral in its vast Gothic interior. I mean, still vying with Milan for second place of largest cathedral in Europe. Milan larger by footprint, Seville by cubic volume, and there is certainly a lot of that. I kind of remain unmoved by the, well, frankly pretty vulgar tomb of Christopher Columbus. I know we're still debating the degree to which he was responsible for the atrocities in the Americas, but I still find very little to celebrate about the man. The distinctively Islamic courtyard, with its orange trees framing both the cathedral and Giralda together, is a magical space. Much like the trip itself, I am opting to hard cut here, as I couldn't linger too long. The queues to get in had eaten a lot of my remaining time, and we had a bus to catch to the next city. I realise this is far from a comprehensive summary of Seville. Given we were there just a day, it's likely no surprise, but yeah, so for example, we didn't hit the Cetas this time, nor, as mentioned, the Alcazar for a second time, though, yeah, here it is. And yes, just outside the city, Italica and its Roman ruins is very much worth a revisit, but not this time. So yes, a brief glimpse, sure. More just an episode within the large narrative of our trip spanning 4 cities across Spain. I'm actually a bit chuffed to actually have a shorter episode for a change. I mean, goodness knows, there's been enough episodes on the channel that ended up close to half an hour in runtime, even after they'd been trimmed down. It's nice to be concise for once. I'm actually in a bit of an odd place with all of this. Ever since I first learnt about Al-Andalus, credit to Bettany Hughes on that one, I, like countless millions before me, became fixated on the beauty of the art and architecture, and the mystery of it too. I mean, while there's more of it on display in Andalusia than most parts of the Iberian Peninsula, it is all partially buried under everything that Catholic Spain became in the next 500 years. And yeah, you come from the rather damp, mossy England, and then there's this land of heat that's filled with enigmatic and gorgeous Islamic art. I mean, yeah, this is possibly the least insightful thing I've ever said. Like, wow, you mean British people like visiting Spain? Ugh, this is shocking stuff, Dave. You got any more expert travel insights you could offer us? But yeah, it's not hard to see why a Brit like myself would be an absolute sucker for all of this. And yeah, it's still a bit of a ways in the future. I've got to get through hill forts, the Normans, the Saxons, before we can even make a start on the Al-Andalus episodes, and not forgetting we haven't actually finished up on the Venetian Republic series just yet. So I feel this pang of impatience to crack on with it. But yeah, I'm still in a place where I know a modest amount about Al-Andalusian Spain, but not enough to make academically valid observations, or at least avoid obvious mistakes. So I still have a lot more reading to do, this much is apparent. But very excited for the next episode, as we were not only leaving Seville, but Andalusia entirely and heading for the city of Merida and its frankly ridiculous quantities of surviving Roman architecture. So you can catch that next time. In the meantime, if you've enjoyed the music in the background, that's ours. We create all the music for these episodes, and you can support us on bandcamp.com. If you want to support the channel, that is the place to do it. Please follow us on all the socials, and we'll catch you for the next one very soon.